What if I told you that this little kiosk inside a Canadian Tire once owned a quarter of North America, is older than both Canada and the United States combined? Actually, wait, no, sorry, not combined, but separate. But is now reduced to a measly little tiny kiosk that doesn't even have its original name. It's just a numbered company now. But what if I also told you that I, the Grand Wizards, actually I shouldn't use the word Grand Wizard, that I, Wizards, have a plan to bring it back. This is the story of the downfall of the Hudson's Bay Company and how I plan to revive it. On May 2nd, 1670, King Charles II of England signed a royal charter granting a group of investors sole trade and commerce over an enormous stretch of North American territory. He called it Rupert's Land after his cousin Prince Rupert, because when you own a continent, you get to name it after your family. The company's full name was the Governor and Company of Adventurers of England Trading into Hudson's Bay, but nobody called it that because it was way too long. But the word adventurer made sense. Their whole business model was going through waters that had multiple people killed. I guess this was considered reasonable back in 1670. For the next 200 years, the Hudson's Bay Company did not merely operate in Canada. It was freaking Canada. It built the trading posts. It set the prices. It negotiated with indigenous nations. It was, in every practical sense, the government of a territory larger than Western Europe, answering to no one except a board of directors in London and the king. And what were they trading exactly? Beaver pelts. Yes, because European men in the 17th and 18th century decided that beaver pelts made very fashionable hats, and it was so important to have them that they would send people over to the other side of the world to risk their lives to have them made. In 1870, the Hudson's Bay Company sold Rupert's Land to the new Canadian government for £300,000 and some farmland in Saskatchewan. £300,000 back then roughly equates to 75 million Canadian dollars today. To put it into perspective, that's about 3 months of my rent. Rupert's Land was about a third of what Canada is today. Later, the Hudson's Bay Company pivoted to retail. It built department stores. By the mid-20th century, the Bay was one of the most recognizable brands in Canada. The striped blanket, the coat of arms, the flagship stores in every major city. It was the unofficial outfitter of the Canadian Olympic team. It was by every measure an institution. But like every good business, it got ruined by one thing: stupid freaking private equity. Okay, so I'm going to cut the sinister voice because this part actually gets me mad. So in 2006, an American private equity firm acquired the Hudson's Bay. Now, they decided to do what private equity does best and just put an already fairly decent company and just make it increase its debt in order to grow aggressively. The Hudson's Bay acquired Lord & Taylor, it acquired Saks Fifth Avenue, it acquired Saks off Fifth, and it acquired a Dutch department store chain. Now, each of these acquisitions just kept adding more and more debt. And on top of that, with the debt accumulated, they decided to sell the flagship stores, the real estate that was the most valuable part of the business, and decided to lease it back to them. So the company that once owned like 40% of Canada now did not even own the buildings that it operated in. Now tack on a global pandemic, people moving away from brick and mortar retail to online retail, and a trade war with our neighbor, and boom, you get bankruptcy. In March of 2025, the Hudson's Bay Company officially launched liquidation proceedings. They sold everything, including putting up for bid their intellectual property. The winning bid for this came from Canadian Tire. They paid about $30 million for the Hudson's Bay name. Yes, the company that once owned like 40% of Canada was sold for $30 million. To put it into perspective, there are actually condos in Toronto that are worth more than $30 million. And then, to add insult to injury, they were actually forced to change their name due to some legal conflict during the selling of their name. So they're not even called the Hudson's Bay Company, really. Their actual name is like 1242939 BC Unlimited Liability Company. But I, the great wizards, have a plan to bring it back to its former glory. Last week, the Canadian government, more specifically the Prime Minister Mark Carney, announced a new sovereign wealth fund for Canada with an initial investment of $25 billion. Now he says this is going to infrastructure and other projects like that, but let's be real, when has this actually ever worked out favorably? Mr. Carney, I propose instead that you and the Canadian government buy back the Hudson's Bay Company from Canadian Tire. We have already lost our beloved Tim Hortons. Don't make us lose another great Canadian institution. Will this benefit the Canadian people? Probably not, but how cool would it look if every Canadian embassy around the world had a Hudson's Bay? Think of how cool it would look if every Canadian official and Canadian Armed Forces member was draped out in Hudson's Bay gear. We can then get rich Canadians to invest in it. Afterwards, we will list it on the New York City Stock Exchange, artificially heighten the price, keep dumping that good old taxpayer money into it. Afterwards, when the market cap of the Hudson's Bay Company reaches something like $100 trillion, we will gift shares to every Canadian citizen. After that, we will simply rug pull it from our American neighbors and they will be left footing the bill. That is my plan to save the Hudson's Bay Company. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.